It is Locked on Jazz for the 9th of May. Where does our top talent rank in the NBA? Where'd they rank when the season started? And where they come up on various metrics? And what does that mean for the Jazz off season? Is there a home run to be hit of any player that might be available? We take a look at all of it coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms for you. So the last week of season and review shows led me to a few observations. One of which was that I thought the answer, having looked at Phoenix and looked at Milwaukee and looked at some Boston, we can dig into. I think it's relevant because of Danny Ainge, but it's probably not relevant to how we could build a team, was really these kind of grand slam trades. That these trades that were made by these rosters to go get Chris Paul and Jrue Holiday were the game changers. And the second thing that kind of led me was watching this weekend was watching the elite talent of each of the teams, and then kind of wondering, where does our elite talent rank in that realm, and how does the top level of these rosters, which seems to, again, despite all the other conversations, the top level of your roster really matters. Now, Jokic this year has an MVP season, and he doesn't have another top 100 player on his roster with him, and we see how far that can go. So you've got to have a collection of top talent. And frankly, that's where the Jazz were 2 years ago, was that they had just a bunch of guys with kind of remarkable years. And frankly, a little bit this year too. And when we run through some of the rankings of this season, one of the things that will jump out more than any other, and really could probably be a headline of a show, is that Mike Conley's playoff demise derailed the entire season compared to Mike Conley's regular season excellence. And that becomes obvious here in a second. So what we want to look at today is, first, to be able to answer part two, is where do our players rank? And second, is there a player that might be available that would be classified? And remember, Chris Paul and Jrue Holiday, when they were acquired, were probably thought at that point as 35 to 50 talent in the NBA. They both had come off kind of mundane years. Chris was getting older. Jrue was sitting in New Orleans, languishing in losses. So we'll look at that in a second. So let's start with where our guys rank. On ESPN Rank, when the season started, when they do their collective ranking system as a group, our two best players, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, ranked 18th and 25th in the NBA. Of the remaining 8 teams in the NBA, every single one of them has a top 16 player when the season started, other than Memphis. And our highest ranking was 18. Every single one of them had 2 players in the top 27, at least, other than Memphis and Dallas. Dallas didn't have anybody with Luka. The Suns had the 13th and 15th best players. Dallas had the 4th. Golden State had the 5th in Steph, and then 27th and 37th. Probably Draymond would move now. We'll get to that. Memphis didn't have anyone better than 31. Miami 16 and 21. Boston 14 and 27. Bucks 2, 19 and 22. That's how you build a champion. 3 in the top 25. 76ers had 7 and 10. And we had 18 and 25. Okay, like 8. So if we had advanced to this round, other than Memphis, we would have the lowest ranked best player. And we would be only one of 1, 2, 3 teams to not have a player in 2 players in the top, more than 2, the top 25. Okay. So certainly we were trying to do this collectively. Andy Bailey, who you may follow on Twitter, does great work, puts together a collective, what I call wisdom of crowds ranking. Wisdom of crowds is the idea, on the simplest term, if you're at a state park and 2 of us walk up and guess the amount of jelly beans in a jar, the chances are we could be close, we could not be. If one of us gets lucky, we could be. But the idea of wisdom of the crowds, if I bring 100 people together and have them guess the jelly beans, and I take the average, that is an almost every single time going to be a better system of guessing the jelly beans than it is 1 or 2 people guessing. If you take the average, you'll almost always be closer in a wisdom of crowds. So if we look at the average of about, Andy does a nice job. This was of about 5 or 6 different rating systems. LeBron, box score plus minus, all the kind of geeky numbers that are out there. He's done a wonderful job. We appreciate him. So box score plus minus, EPM, which is, I think, expected plus minus, Raptor, which is the 538 system, or it might be ESPN's. LeBron is the 538 system, and game score per 36 minutes. So he combines all of these systems together. And this is at the end of the season now. Okay, so this is at the end of the season. And we have the 10th best player in the NBA and the 21st best player in the NBA, according to these systems. Rudy's the 10th. Of the playoff teams, of the final 8 playoff teams, all of them have a top 12 player, which we would be included in, except for Memphis. 1, 2, 3 of them have players that are in the top 20, multiple players in the top 20. So only Phoenix, Milwaukee, Philadelphia have 3 and Miami. Nope, just those 3 have 3 players in the top 20. The 76ers, the Bucks, the Heat, the Grizzlies, and Phoenix have 2 players in the top 25. 5 teams, including us. So suddenly, Jazz talent looks okay there. When you compare average of all of those things, Rudy is a top 10 talent, and the Jazz with a 21st player in Donovan. Now, I think we all have to admit that Rudy's top 10 talent of the regular season, you'll see Rudy ranks much higher in LeBron, which really equates for defense, is not always as impactful as Dalen is telling me that Raptor is 538 and LeBron is B-ball index. Okay. I thought LeBron was somebody else's, but I'm going to trust Dalen because I didn't know. So Rudy, as a top 10 player in all of these metrics, as a regular season player, I think we have to admit has less impact in the playoffs as he does in the regular season. And that's a real issue. Like his lack of offense seems to become a negative, and his defense, while our defense was really good for the last 4 games of that series, is not as talented teams seem to do a better job against that. If we look at the average EPM, so, effective plus minus, and LeBron, things get kind of interesting. And then we'll look at, using these collection of stats, what players in the top 50 are available. Because what this says to me initially is our top talent is a little off. Like, we don't have a real top 10 guy the way, depending on the metric, Dallas, Golden State, Boston, Bucks, Philly have. We just don't quite have that top 10 guy. But our 2 guys are pretty outstanding. And so after we're done looking at these next two individual stats, which just give a little bit of different perspective, it's why the wisdom's a crowd has value. We'll look at what players that rank either in the preseason top 50 or in either of these two systems top 50 are available. And is there actually a home run grand slam out there? Monday edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. The Murdoch family has been in Utah for over 80 years and simply are not going to take advantage of the climate right now to take advantage of you. That's really as simple as Blake says. We're not going to the grocery store. We're not going to church. We're not going somewhere else where we see someone who we grabbed an extra $5,000 from because we could right now. The Chevy lineup of trucks is unprecedented. The Silverado and the Colorado are absolutely remarkable. Then you have the SUV lineup led by the King Poobahs, the Suburban, and the Tahoe. But it comes down to the Blazer as well as the Trax and the Equinox for a great lineup of cars. Go check them all out at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. Stop by and have them take a look. If you want a VIP meeting, feel free to just email me first, and I'll set that up for you over at Murdoch Chevy in Woods Cross. NBA playoff series are all at an interesting moment, so let's check out our Bet Online lines for this. The Celtics are plus 175, so the Bucks are favored in that series at minus 165. Warriors are favored at minus 1,000 now with the Ja Morant injury. That's just such a bummer. The Heat are minus 155 with the 76ers plus 135, so that one's still close. And the Suns are still a plus 255 favorite. A little bit surprised by that. Here's the odds for tonight's games. Milwaukee is a 1-point favorite at home against Boston. The Warriors are a 10.5-point favorite against the Ja Morantless Memphis Grizzlies. Miami is a 3.5-point favorite against Philadelphia, and the Suns are a 6-point favorite against the Dallas Mavericks, who were super good yesterday. It's all brought to you by our good friends at betonline.net, your number one source for all betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball. Hope you got in on the run on the roses. That was fun. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. All right, let's continue. So at EPM, the plus-minus stat, Phoenix has, or again, looking at it, the Jazz have a 10th best player in the league in Rudy. Donovan comes in at 21st. Pretty interesting, by the way. When the year started, ESPN ranked 18 and 25 for Donovan and Rudy. And that's, I think, where Rudy will be again, if not lower. That once, and I think Donovan was first and Rudy was 25th. That once, you have a playoff failure and Rudy gets hit by it so much. And then you look at the metrics and the average has him at 10 and 21. Effective plus-minus has him at 10 and 21. LeBron actually has Rudy at 5th and Donovan at 38th. Seems a little extreme. Though LeBron's system really, really weighs defense when you look at the players. It really, really weighs defense. So looking at EPM, you have five, only in this system, they actually only have 4 players in the top 10. They're still left. But Phoenix has 2 in the top 15. Golden State has Memphis has 3 in the top 30, 32. Miami has 2 in the top 22. Boston has the 7th and then a bunch in the 40s. The Bucks have 2 in the top 10. Philly has 2 in the top 25. We've got a 10th and a 21st. Again, that would lead you to believe that our top talent matches up well enough and looks, and this is pretty encouraging. That, now Rudy's the 10th. So that's what gets a little interesting here, is that Rudy's playoff impact seems to not be as big as, say, Luka's, who, didn't have a great year and doesn't come out great on these metrics. And Luka's is a top 5, top 2, top 1 player in the NBA. Over on LeBron, 5th for Rudy, 38th for Donovan. And then this is where LeBron's system has a little bit more of kind of not as encouraging other than Rudy's 5th. But there are 5, 6, 7, everybody but Dallas in this system has a top 12 player in the NBA. And let's be honest, Dallas has the top 3 player in the NBA. In Luka. Luka's the best player in that series by a large margin. So Luka didn't have a very good year. His defensive numbers weren't good as LeBron docked him. Seems a little silly, but this is the one where it's a little different, where, okay, our top 5 guy is Rudy Gobert and your top 5 guys, Steph Curry, Ja Morant, Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid feels different. Feels a little different. So that's the only one. Then, Donovan comes out at 38th, which isn't very generous on this, but Memphis has 2 in the top 20. Phoenix has 2 in the top 25. Boston has that same collection. They actually have Al Horford in the top 10 because they like defense. Bucks, 2 in the top 20. Philly, 2 in the top 20. So in LeBron, we don't come out quite as well because our best player is Rudy, who just doesn't really rank as 5th. And his Donovan comes out just as 38th because his defense gets docked. So that one, you have to decide whether you like that. Some people really think LeBron's a very, very good system on this. But the overall takeaway here is top talent is what matters. You look at these guys, they all have top talent. And our top talent is a defensive player who doesn't translate as well to offensively. And our secondary top talent ranking has him at 18th. The numeric rankings have him at 21st, 21st, 38th that we looked at. Not quite where I think we probably have Donovan ranked in our minds as a player. But, again, 25th is a little weak for your second guy if your first guy's not offensive, right? So that's not great. The question now is, and what was clear to me doing our research on Milwaukee and Phoenix is there a third guy that you can add to this? So if we go back to ESPN rank on the top 50 players in the league of available players, this tells you 2 things. The first thing is this will tell you why we are going to incessantly be hit with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert rumors every single day. And I'm like close to just embracing them and deciding to talk about them every day on the show. Because the fact is they're the only 2 really high-level players that are available in the NBA. And the Mike Conley rumors will come shortly when people forget how poorly he played in the playoffs, when they start looking at his season and how good he was. So here on ESPN's rank, so these are the preseason rankings, are the best players that in theory could be available barring something. But when you look at it, you just don't think the others could be available. Like you don't think Chicago's moving DeMar DeRozan. You don't think. So Dame Lillard was 8th. He's probably not anymore. Russell Westbrook was 29th. He's probably not anymore. Zach LaVine, who's a free agent, is 33rd. You'd have to convince Zach LaVine that he wants to come to Utah in a sign and trade. And then you'd have to be able to create a sign and trade that doesn't involve Donovan or Rudy that Chicago seemingly is willing to take. In theory, Chicago probably takes it because otherwise they get nothing back for Zach LaVine. Julius Randle was 42nd. Tobias Harris was 46th. Philadelphia keeps winning, but I think they have a real financial problem. I think Tobias Harris is in play. Mike Conley was 48th. We already have him. And Kristaps Porzingis was 50th. Okay? None of those are that interesting other than we end up with the Kristaps Porzingis conversation that we had again the other day. If you look at the average Andy Bailey average rank wisdom of crowds, Mike Conley's 27th. This story is probably what jumped out to me more than any other during this research, is that Mike Conley had a year that metrically has him near the top of players in the NBA. And for whatever reason, the matchup with Dallas in the playoffs was a disaster for him. And he ended up shooting 38% from the field, 28% from 3. He's never been a great playoff player, honestly. If you look at Mike Conley's playoffs history, he's played 9. He's now played in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 playoff series. In his 14 playoff series, let's call it 13. Last year's one game against Clippers. He's 13 playoff series. He's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, half of them where he shoots under 40%. He shot 33% in the series, 5 of 25 from three. He was the number 2 off the bounce three-point shooter in all of the NBA last year. Didn't make that. I do not know. I'd have to check. I do not know that whether he ever hit a catch and shoot three in the playoffs. He was 0-4 going into, I believe, the final night, and you just kind of knew that would change, that he would get it going, and I don't know that he ever did. Mike Conley finished the playoffs 0 for 10 on catch and shoot threes. Like, that fade is probably the biggest story of the playoffs, and we better be careful deciding we have to blow up the whole thing, because this is what happened. If we got Mike Conley, who played Memphis in the first round last year, where he shot 47% and 55% from three, or Mike Conley in the 7-game bubble series against Denver, where he shot 48% and 53% from three, or his final playoff series with Memphis, where he shot 49 and 45, that's what's interesting, is he had not had this rep. He'd had 3 great playoff series prior, and 4 of his last 5 had been amazing. The Jazz win the series, but they didn't. And that's really, we can go look at a lot of other things, but quite honestly, your third best player, ranked in the regular season 27th in the average ranking system, 23rd in EPM plus minus, 27th in LeBron, goes and shoots 33% from on the field and 20% from three, and is hard to keep on the floor. You know what? Should have we seen that coming? I don't see where you should have seen that coming, but that's probably the primary evaluation system that we actually have to have here more than anything else, is whether he was injured, there was something wrong, something with the matchup, whatever it might be. All right, we'll look at other players that are available based on the numeric metric system that is out there. Today's show brought to you by Built. The new granola bar experience from Built is 15% grams of protein. Right now, only chocolate coconut with 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, 4 grams of sugar are still available. The others sold out because they're amazing. Coconut marshmallow, churro, and banana cream pie are still available. Those are your puffs. And then your regular great flavors: coconut almond, coconut, salted caramel, cookies and cream, raspberry, cherry barcia, and mint brownie are all available for you. 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. It is Built. Use the promo code LOCKED15. It's the best deal you can get out there, and you can use it on your entire order at LOCKED15 at 15 at built.com. The questions coming in: why don't you talk about how horrible and a liability that Royce was? Well, few things here. One is Royce didn't have a very good series. Okay, like that's fine. He shot 40% from the field and 28% from three. He did not have a great defensive year at all. He actually had a better defensive series, and he's probably giving credit for, depending on who he was guarding. But Royce O'Neale is not supposed to be one of your 5 best players. Like, he's probably supposed to be your 6th or 7th best player. So that's part of the reason. Like, it's a far bigger deal if one of your top 3 guys has a brutal series than if Royce O'Neale has a brutal series. Now, what often happens is in a fan base is you have a player you decide you want to pick on. And certainly, Dorian Finney-Smith is everything that we had hoped. Like Dorian Finney-Smith is like this emerging incredible thing that's like right in your face, that makes it ever so painful that that Royce, isn't shooting 45% from three. But I don't, honestly, I'm not sure that I sometimes feel like, and you can disagree with me, your own, the Royce hatred or disgust is like an agenda. Like, you've decided that you don't like Royce and you're going to pound at Royce because, that's just, it's not like he's supposed to be a great defensive player. I'm not sure he is. I'm not sure. I think that the idea, Dorian Finney-Smith is pretty interesting in that he's undrafted and he's that good of a And he's that good of an athlete. That's pretty uncommon, but he basically played center. But by the way, here's some data on Royce. Let's make sure that we get a few things right on Royce's supposedly terrible playoffs. So Jalen Brunson shot 39%, 11 of 28 when guarded by Royce, and 2 of 10 from 3. Luka Doncic shot 2 of 7 from the field and 0 for 4 from 3 when guarded by Royce. Dorian Finney-Smith was 0 for 6 and 0 for 6 from 3 when guarded by Royce. Spencer Dinwiddie was 6 of 10 and 3 of 5 from 3. So Spencer Dinwiddie gave Royce the biz a little bit. Reggie Bullock was 3 of 6. Dwight Powell was bigger than Royce, and when he switched on him on the pick and roll with Rudy, shot 3 of 4. Like, I don't think Royce had a great playoff series, but I also don't. Yeah, so that's why. If you want to know the answer to why the question was, why don't you talk about how brutal Royce's series was? Because I think it's actually not as brutal as everyone's making it sound, and it's rather immaterial. In fact, like if you really want to get into it, so if we get into Royce's playoff per game shooting, and he takes his what? I'd have to find it here. I don't think playoff series. So Royce went 7 of 25 from 3 and shot 28%. So Royce took took 3 or 4 threes a game, which is kind of what he always does. So that's not any different than what you expect. And if Royce had shot his 50% from 3, he would have made 3 more threes the entire series. So you're complaining that Royce O'Neale's didn't make 3 more threes. That's what his number would have been if he shot his 40% for the season. He would have been 10 of 25 instead of 7 of 25. Okay, would have been nice to have those 3. Is that really worthy of all that complaining? Let's just make sure we know exactly what we're asking for. Here's the players' top 50 that might be better, or top 50 ranked players that might be available in some way. So again, the wisdom of crowds, Mike Conley's 27. Kristaps Porzingis is 37. Terry Rozier is 38. Zach LaVine is 53. Wendell Carter Jr. is 55. Here's what's interesting. We're going to do this on the show tomorrow. You go look at the players ranked 50 to 100 in the NBA last year. It's crazy how different it is. Like, we go look at the players, ESPN ranked 50 to 100 last year. They're not going to be, there's about 20 of them that won't be 50 to 100 next year. And probably 10 of them will be in the top 50, maybe 50. So maybe the real question is trying to figure out in that 50 to 100 who the players are that are ascending. We'll do that tomorrow on the show. On EPM, Conley 23rd, Porzingis 28th, Wendell Carter Jr. 50th. I don't know how Wendell Carter Jr. fits, but I love Wendell Carter Jr. I just think he wins, which he's never done in his career. So, it's a silly thing, but I actually like him. Zach LaVine, 54. Damian Lillard, 57. And in LeBron, Porzingis comes out 8th because they like defense. Conley, 27th. Lillard, 35th. Wendell Carter Jr., 42nd. It's interesting. There's a lot of people talking about Malcolm Brogdon. I guess the theory is he becomes available because they got Tyrese Halliburton. And can you put enough together for Malcolm Brogdon without giving up Donovan or Rudy that Malcolm Brogdon becomes your third player and can be your Drew Holiday or your Chris Paul? I'm not sure that I'm not as big a Malcolm Brogdon fan as some others are. I'll just say that. I like him. He's powerful. He wants the ball a lot. I guess my issue would be I sometimes feel like he needs the ball more than his skill level should have him have the ball. Crazy efficient. Pretty good points gain player. Not sure why you wouldn't just pair him with Tyrese Haliburton. Would be my quick thought on that. And I don't know if you're moving him to give Tyrese Haliburton the ball, and $21 million, I don't think you're looking at Bojan Bogdanovic as someone you want. He's got, the answer would be you want out of his 4 years or 3 years left in $22 million. And so, Mike Conley's not getting done unless we're unloading picks. I'll say this. I don't think I'll leave on this. This is a deep note we don't have many picks left. I don't think it's a crazy idea to go all in, bury a bunch of picks, try to hit a grand slam with a third player. If it doesn't work, move them all at the end of the year, and you're reacquiring picks for Rudy, Donovan, and whoever you added in a manner that then you actually gain your picks back. But there's somebody else's. It then makes tanking difficult because you don't control any of your picks for the future, which is the downside of that theory. So, all right, that is Locked On Jazz for today. I don't know where that leaves us on whether or not we believe there's a Grand Slam player, but you can add that in the comment zone over on YouTube. Thanks very much for tuning in. This is Locked On Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making this your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On Today as your second listen.